"You have to leave, Mother. This isn't your house anymore." The words sliced through the damp Charlotte air, colder than the November breeze that whipped at my thin, hospital-issued clothing. I froze, my hand still clutching the cane, my weight resting heavily on a foot that felt asleep. The incision along my spine, a 4-week-old wound from a complicated spinal fusion, screamed in protest, a sharp, electric pain that traveled from my vertebrae down to my hip. I stared at my son, Marcus, standing in the doorway of the home I had shared with his father for 38 years. "What did you say?" I whispered, the sound stolen by the wind. "I'm sorry it has to be this way," Marcus said, though his voice held the flat, emotionless tone of a stranger reading a script. He wasn't looking at my eyes. He was looking just past my shoulder, at the taxi idling at the curb. "Things have changed while you were in the hospital. You have no place here. You'll have to find somewhere else to live." Behind him, in the warm light of the foyer, I saw his wife, Claire. She was wearing my pearls, the ones my late husband Arthur had given me on our 30th anniversary. And flanking her, standing as if they owned the very floorboards Arthur and I had installed, were her parents, Julian and Beatrice Devereaux. In that instant, the physical pain was eclipsed by a glacial dread. This was not a misunderstanding. This was an execution. I understood the betrayal. It wasn't just about losing my home. It was the first chilling chord of a darker plot I couldn't yet grasp. If you've ever wondered what happens when a mother is pushed to her absolute limit, my story is one you need to hear. My discharge papers crinkled in my pocket. 28 days in that sterile white room at Presbyterian Hospital had felt like an eternity. The spinal fusion, a surgery I had put off for years, had been followed by a relentless infection, turning a 1-week stay into a month-long battle against fever and delirium. I was exhausted, but as the taxi pulled up to the curb of our classic Tudor, relief had washed over me. I was finally home. Home. The 2-story house that Arthur and I had bought as a wreck and lovingly restored, board by board. The climbing roses I'd planted were still clinging to the trellis, though their blooms had withered, untended in my absence. "Need help with your bag, ma'am?" the driver had asked, eyeing my slow, painful exit from the car. "Just to the door, please," I'd replied, my voice raspy. "My son should be waiting." And he was. The door opened before we reached the porch. Marcus stood there, but not with the relieved smile I had pictured. His face was a mask of cold resolution. "You shouldn't have come today. We were expecting you tomorrow," he said. The driver set my small suitcase down, sensed the suffocating tension, and retreated quickly. I paid him, a sudden, desperate wish that he wouldn't leave me alone filling my chest. As the taxi's taillights disappeared, Marcus spoke the words that shattered my world. "We made arrangements. Claire's parents needed to relocate from Atlanta. This house has far more space than you need, and the documents are already signed. You'll have to find somewhere else to live." My mind, still foggy from medication, struggled to process the information. "Documents? I haven't signed anything, Marcus. This is absurd. Let me into my house." I tried to step past him, leaning heavily on my cane. Claire moved to block me, a cloud of expensive perfume washing over me. "Eleanor," she said, her voice dripping with a false sweetness I had long learned to despise, "we've already packed your personal belongings. They're in boxes in the garage. We can have them sent wherever you end up staying." My belongings? I looked past her and saw them. Julian and Beatrice Devereaux, sipping wine in my living room. I had only met them a handful of times. Julian, tall and silver-haired, always struck me as predatory, all teeth and charm. Beatrice, with her perpetually judgmental gaze, had never hidden her disdain for my modest life. "I'm sorry it came to this," Julian said, strolling into the foyer, his voice utterly unapologetic. But Marcus made the arrangements. The house was legally transferred. "Legally?" I stammered, the word feeling foreign. "That's impossible." Marcus finally met my gaze. His eyes were cold, dead. "The power of attorney, Mother. Remember those papers you signed before your surgery? For medical decisions? They also included financial matters." The revelation hit me like a physical blow, stealing my breath. Yes, a stack of documents. My own son had handed them to me while I was being prepped for anesthesia. My mind clouded with anxiety about the operation. I had trusted him. I had signed without reading past the first page. "You tricked me," I whispered. The words felt small, inadequate against the sheer scale of the treachery. "We're doing what's best for everyone," Claire interjected, adjusting the pearls at her throat. "This house is too much for you to manage. Marcus has been handling your affairs for years." "Don't come here again," Marcus finished, his voice final. "We'll send your things." I stood there, a 71-year-old woman, weak from surgery, leaning on a cane on the porch of the home I had built. I looked at the man I had raised, the boy I had taught to read, the teenager I had comforted through his first heartbreak. He was a stranger. "This is illegal," I said softly. "It's done," he replied. Something inside me snapped. But it wasn't the fragile thing they expected. It wasn't tears or pleading. It was the cold, hard clarity of my 30 years as a forensic accountant. It was the realization that this was not just greed. This was a conspiracy. "Enjoy it then," I said simply. I turned, my spine screaming, and limped back toward the curb. The confusion on their faces at my lack of hysterics was the only small victory I could claim. I pulled out my phone, my fingers trembling, but not from weakness. I did not call the police. Not yet. That would come later, on my terms. Instead, I sent a single text to Sophia Russo, the one person I trusted. "Plan B," I typed. They took the house. The hotel room in downtown Charlotte was sterile, beige, and smelled of industrial cleaner. It was a temporary refuge. My hands shook as I sat on the edge of the stiff mattress. Sophia's reply came instantly. "Stay put. I'm on my way." Sophia Russo and I had been friends for 40 years, ever since we'd been the only two women in our advanced finance class. She had become a formidable estates lawyer, while I had built a career unraveling complex financial crimes. When Arthur died, she had helped me organize my affairs with a meticulousness born of our shared professional paranoia. "Always have a backup, Eleanor," she'd insisted, setting up a complex series of trusts, especially with family. I had thought she was being dramatic. Now, her foresight felt prophetic. An hour later, a sharp knock announced her arrival. Sophia looked impeccable, her tailored suit a stark contrast to my hospital-issued sweatpants. Her expression, however, was pure, unadulterated fury. "Those miserable vultures," she seethed, hugging me carefully. "Are you all right? Physically or emotionally?" I tried to smile. It failed. The incision hurts, but the betrayal hurts more. "I think I'm going to be sick." She placed her briefcase on the desk and began pulling out files. "I've already started the process. The trust documentation is ironclad." Arthur was meticulous. "That house transfer won't stand up to a legal breeze, let alone a hurricane." "How long?" I asked, sinking back onto the pillows. "To invalidate the fraudulent transfer? A few weeks, maybe months if they fight. But, Eleanor," she paused, her professional mask slipping, "there's something else. Something I found when you texted me. I immediately checked your accounts." My stomach clenched. "What?" "Unusual withdrawals from your investment portfolio while you were hospitalized. Large ones." She handed me a printed statement. My accountant's brain, though dulled by pain and medication, immediately saw the pattern. 5 transfers, totaling over $350,000. All to accounts I didn't recognize, all made with a digital signature. "While I was in the ICU," I whispered, the full weight of the betrayal landing. "They didn't just take the house. They are liquidating everything." "It gets worse," Sophia said gravely. "My paralegal ran a preliminary check on the Devereaux. Their real estate consulting business in Atlanta has a string of complaints against it. And Claire's professional history shows she worked at 3 different mortgage companies that were all shut down for regulatory violations." It clicked into place with chilling clarity. Mortgage fraud. "And they've been planning this for months," Sophia nodded. "Your surgery gave them the perfect window." My mind raced. Claire's sudden interest in my finances over the past year, Marcus's casual questions about my portfolio. This betrayal wasn't impulsive, it was a long, slow-burning fuse. "Marcus," I said, his name catching in my throat. Does he know what they're doing? The fraud?" Sophia's silence was answer enough. "He taught him better than this," I murmured. "Arthur taught him better." "People change, Eleanor," she said gently. "The question is, what do you want to do?" I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of my 71 years. When I opened them, the grief had solidified into something hard and cold. "Everything," I answered. "I want to reclaim what is mine, and I want to make them face the consequences. All of them, even Marcus." Sophia's eyebrow arched. "He made his choice," I said, the words hurting to speak. "If he's involved in this, he deserves what's coming." She nodded, her expression grim but satisfied. "Then we have to be strategic. I have contacts in the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit who will be very interested in this." "I have contacts too," I replied, thinking of my old colleagues. "But not yet. They think I'm a defeated old woman. They think I'm helpless. Let's use that." My phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. "Mom, we need the passwords to your remaining investment accounts to transfer the funds for your long-term care. Please send them." I showed the message to Sophia. She shook her head in disgust. "What do I say?" I asked. "Nothing," Sophia replied, a predatory glint in her eye. "Let them wonder. Let them get nervous." The old Eleanor would have replied instantly, desperate to keep the peace. But that Eleanor had been left on the doorstep. This Eleanor was playing a long game. "You have to see this," Sophia said, sliding her laptop across the desk of the extended stay suite. We had moved, paying cash, to a place where we could work without being traced. A week had passed. My physical strength was slowly returning, but the emotional wound remained septic. The screen showed property records for my neighborhood. "The third one down," Sophia pointed. My eyes widened. "The Miller family, 2 doors down. Sold 3 months ago. The buyer, Devereaux Investment Properties, LLC." "That can't be a coincidence," I murmured. "It's not," Sophia said, clicking. "The Hendersons across the street. Sold last month. Same buyer. The retired couple on the corner, under contract. Same buyer." "They're buying the whole block," I whispered, the accountant in me seeing the pattern before the victim did. Sophia opened a new file. A zoning application filed with the city of Charlotte 2 weeks ago while I was in the ICU. They submitted a proposal to rezone the entire block, from single-family residential to mixed-use commercial. My neighborhood sat on the edge of Charlotte's booming South End. With that new zoning, the property values wouldn't just increase, they would explode. "They're using my house as the operational headquarters," I said, the pieces fitting together. "Once they control the block, they force the zoning change. Values triple, maybe quadruple. We're looking at a potential profit of $20 million, Sophia finished. "But they needed capital to start the purchases," I reasoned. "Where?" Sophia's face darkened. "That's where you come in. Your $350,000 was the seed money." The calculated cruelty of it. They were using my money to destroy my community, people who had been at Arthur's funeral, people who brought me casseroles. "And Marcus?" I asked, the word tasting like ash. "How involved is he?" Sophia hesitated. She opened another file. A security still from a bank in Atlanta, dated 3 weeks ago, 2 days after my surgery. It showed Marcus and Claire at a table with a loan officer. "They used the power of attorney to access your safe deposit box," Sophia said. "They took the original deed to the house. And the original trust papers." My own son. The boy who cried when he accidentally broke a neighbor's window. How had he become this? "There's one more thing," Sophia said softly. She showed me an email chain, forwarded from a contact at the SEC. The Devereaux had been on their radar. The emails were between Claire and her father, Julian. Dated 8 months ago. They discussed properties in my neighborhood. They mentioned my house as the ideal operations center once we gained control. One phrase made my blood run cold. A note from Claire. "Timing is perfect. Mother's elective surgery is scheduled. Recovery is expected to be difficult. This is the window." "Elective surgery?" I repeated. My spinal fusion wasn't an emergency, but they knew the date months in advance. "Eleanor," Sophia said, her voice a warning. "They were waiting for this. They were counting on you being incapacitated." The betrayal deepened, becoming a chasm. They hadn't just seized an opportunity, they had built their entire plan around my moment of greatest physical vulnerability. "We don't know if Marcus knew the full extent," Sophia started. "Enough," I said, raising a hand. "He knew enough. He knew they wanted my house. He knew they were draining my accounts. He knew." I walked to the window, ignoring the protest from my spine. The Charlotte skyline glittered, indifferent. "What do you want to do?" Sophia asked. I turned back to her. "My decision absolute. I want justice, not just for me, for my neighbors, and I want my house back." "Then we move carefully," Sophia said. "They think they've already won." "Good," I replied, a plan forming in my mind, because they're about to be very surprised. "Are you sure about this, Eleanor?" Sophia asked, watching me apply lipstick in the hotel mirror. "Your back is still healing." "I spent 4 weeks in that hospital feeling helpless," I replied, my hand steady. "I'm done with helplessness." 2 weeks had passed since my eviction. In that time, Sophia and I had fed our findings to her contacts at the FBI. The Devereaux, it turned out, were already persons of interest. Our evidence, the fraudulent POA, the bank transfers, the zoning application, was the missing link. We struck a deal. The FBI wanted to watch them, build a larger case. I wanted my house back. They agreed to let me take the lead on one condition. I wore a wire and had a panic button. "The timing has to be perfect," I said, adjusting the blazer of my best suit. I was no longer a victim. I was a forensic accountant on an audit. "Claire's weekly salon appointment is at 2, Sophia confirmed, checking her watch. "She'll be gone for 3 hours. Julian and Beatrice are at a real estate luncheon. And Marcus," she paused, "is at work. He won't be home until 6. My son's predictability, once a source of comfort, was now a strategic advantage. The taxi dropped me 2 blocks away. I walked slowly, using the cane more as a prop of fragility than a necessity. As I approached my home, I saw the changes. My roses were gone, dug up and replaced with sterile, modern shrubs. The porch swing Arthur and I had spent a weekend restoring was gone. I didn't go to the front door. I went to the side door, the one leading to the kitchen, the one I'd forgotten to lock the day I went to the hospital. The lock was old, and I still had my original key. It turned smoothly. I entered the house silently. It was quiet, but I heard a voice coming from Arthur's study. I crept down the hall. The door was ajar. Julian Devereaux's voice. "The Miller closing is on Friday," he said, speaking into his phone. "Once that's done, we control 40% of the block. The financing? No, that's already handled. We're using Mrs. Vance's banking credentials to secure the note, clean as a whistle. They were using my name to commit more fraud." I took a deep breath, activated the recording app on my phone, and pushed the door open. Julian froze, his hand still holding his phone. "Eleanor," he sputtered, standing up from Arthur's desk. "How did you get in?" "Through the door, Julian," I said calmly. "The one to the house that still legally belongs to me. This property is no longer yours." Marcus was very clear. "Yes, he was," I said, walking toward the filing cabinet. "Just as clear as you are about using my credentials for your financing." The color drained from his face. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The Henderson property, the Miller property. Using my data to secure the funds. I just heard you." Julian's mask of civility dissolved. "You're confused, Eleanor. The surgery has affected your mind." "My mind is perfectly clear," I said, pulling out a file. "Clear enough to understand fraud when I see it. Clear enough to wonder if my son truly understands the RICO charges he's facilitating." Julian's face turned to thunder. "You have no proof. Now get out before I call the police and have you removed for trespassing." "You're right," I said, holding up my phone, the recording app clearly visible. "Proof is essential. That's why I made sure to get it." His eyes widened in fury. "Give me that phone." I don't think so, I said, backing toward the door. He lunged. He was faster than I expected. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my skin. You're not leaving with that. I hadn't anticipated violence. A sharp pain shot through my spine as I stumbled. Let go of me, I shouted, hitting the panic button app on my phone. Give me the phone, he snarled, trying to rip it from my other hand. The front door burst open. FBI, hands where I can see them. 2 agents stormed in, weapons drawn. Julian froze, his hand still on my arm. He slowly released me, raising his hands. Eleanor Vance, the lead agent said. Are you all right? Yes, I panted, leaning against the doorframe. And I believe I have something you'll find very interesting. The FBI office was beige and cold. Your recording is invaluable, Mrs. Vance, Agent Callahan said. Combined with the financial documents from Miss Russo, we have enough for warrants. What about my house? I asked, my hip aching. A judge has issued an emergency order freezing all transactions related to the property. No one can sell it. Relief washed over me. Julian and Beatrice were in custody, but Marcus and Claire were still out there. What happens now? We'll be executing the warrants at the residence tonight, Agent Rips explained. Mrs. Devereaux-Thompson will be taken in for questioning. As for your son. She hesitated. We'll have to determine his level of involvement. I insisted on being there. 3 hours later, I sat in an unmarked car across the street from my own home. Claire's car was in the driveway. She had returned from the salon, unaware her father was in federal custody. Then, a car pulled up. Marcus. He was home early. My heart tightened. I had hoped to spare him the public raid. It's time, Agent Rips said. A convoy of vehicles swept onto the street. Agents in FBI vests swarmed the lawn. Federal agents, we have a warrant. The front door opened. I saw Claire, her face a mask of confusion. Then Marcus appeared, stepping in front of her. They saw me approaching behind the agents. Claire's composure shattered. You! She shrieked, her voice hysterical. You did this! Marcus's eyes found mine. His expression shifted from confusion to dawning horror. Mom? His voice cracked. What is going on? Your mother has provided evidence of large-scale financial fraud, Mr. Thompson, Callahan stated. We have a warrant to search the premises. Fraud? Marcus repeated, looking genuinely baffled. What fraud? The kind where you use a fraudulent power of attorney to steal your mother's house and drain her accounts, I said, my voice shaking but strong. Claire's face went white. You were here? The side door, I said. You never bothered to learn the house's quirks, Claire. Like the fact that it legally belongs to a trust that cannot be transferred without the signature of all trustees, including Sophia Russo, who most certainly did not sign. Mrs. Devereaux-Thompson, you need to come with us, Rip said. I want my lawyer, Claire spat, her venom returning. Mr. Thompson, we'll need you to come downtown as well, Callahan said. I don't understand, Marcus said, his voice hollow. Mom, what have you done? The question, so backward, so blind to his own culpability, broke the last thread of my patience. What have I done? I repeated. I protected myself. I taught you better than this, Marcus. Your father taught you better. As they led Claire away, she turned. You think you've won? You have no idea what my father's lawyers will do. Your father is already in custody, Claire, I said quietly. It's over. Marcus remained on the porch, watching in disbelief as agents carried boxes from our home. Mom, he whispered as I turned to leave. I didn't know everything. You have to believe me. I paused. You knew enough, Marcus. You stood in that doorway and you chose them over me. As I walked away, I heard his broken voice. Where am I supposed to go? The question echoed my own from 2 weeks prior. But I found no satisfaction in the symmetry, only a profound, hollowing sadness. In a cold federal interview room, I finally faced my son. He had requested the meeting. He looked terrible. Mom, he started, I never wanted this. Then explain it to me, Marcus, I said, Sophia beside me. He confessed. It wasn't a defense. It was a pathetic, human story. 3 years ago, he'd made a series of bad investments, losing nearly all his and Claire's savings. He was desperate. Julian Devereaux had offered to help him. Soon, Marcus was entangled in their Atlanta schemes, a small cog in their fraud machine. "They had leverage over me," he whispered. "Claire," she said, "if I didn't cooperate, her father would make sure I took the fall for everything, that I'd go to prison." "And my house?" I asked. "My money?" "That was the test," he admitted, shame coloring his face. "A test of loyalty, to prove I was all in. Claire said once the rezoning went through, we'd have enough money to put you in the best care facility." "The best care facility," I repeated, the words chilling me. "You threw me out of my home for that." "I wanted to believe it," he cried. "It was easier than admitting what I was really doing." Just as that painful, pathetic truth settled, Agent Rips interrupted the meeting. "Mrs. Vance, we need you. We found something in Julian's Atlanta safe." In a separate conference room, she laid out the photographs. They were of me, in the ICU, unconscious, tubes running from my body. "We also found your complete medical records," Rip said. "And these." She showed me dosage charts. My pain medication, altered. My antibiotic regimen, delayed. "Your recovery took longer than expected," Rip said gently. "The infection, we're investigating if it was deliberately aggravated." The room tilted. "Are you saying—" "We identified a nurse, Miranda Jenkins. Phone records show multiple calls to Julian Devereaux. Bank records show payments from a shell corporation." "And this?" Rip said, her face grim. "A life insurance policy, taken out on you 6 months ago? The beneficiary, Marcus Thompson." I refused to believe it. "Not that." I had to see his face. We returned to the interview room. "Marcus," I said, my voice trembling, "did you know they took out a life insurance policy on me?" He looked utterly bewildered. "What? No. Claire handled all our insurance." When Agent Rips explained the medical records, the nurse, the photos, his confusion turned to absolute horror. This was not the face of a co-conspirator. This was the face of a man realizing he had married a monster. "Oh God," he whispered, covering his face. "What have I done? What did I let them do?" He looked up, his eyes clear for the first time in years, full of terror and resolve. "I need to amend my statement," he said to Agent Rips. "I need to tell you everything. Everything." The investigation unraveled a web of deceit that was darker than I could have imagined, Nurse Jenkins confessed. She had been paid to prolong my stay, to keep me incapacitated but stable, by deliberately introducing a mild bacterial contaminant to my IV line. Veronica, it turned out, was the true architect. We found her emails to her parents. They had been targeting me for 2 years, waiting for an opportunity. The plan wasn't just to put me in a care facility. It was to have me declared incompetent and moved to a specific memory unit they'd researched, one known for minimal oversight, where they could control all access. My son, they concluded, was a manageable asset. 2 weeks later, I went home. The house felt alien. My roses were gone. In the kitchen, my handwritten recipe cards, my mother's and grandmother's recipes, had been thrown in the trash. In my bedroom, my jewelry box was empty. Arthur's gifts, gone. But the house was mine. I met Marcus one last time before his sentencing. He had accepted a plea deal. 5 years, reduced to 3 for his full testimony. "Why, Marcus?" I asked him in the visitation room. "I was weak," he said, his voice hollow. "And I was arrogant. I started to believe I deserved more than I'd earned." I reached into my bag. "Your father wrote you a letter. Before he died. He told me to give it to you when you needed it most. I think that time is now." His hand trembled as he took the envelope. He read it, and for the first time, he wept. Not tears of self-pity, but of true, agonizing grief. "Will you ever be able to forgive me, Mom?" I looked at my son, the man he had become, and the boy he had been. "Forgiveness isn't a switch, Marcus. It's a long road. Right now, I don't know. But you are still my son. What happens next depends on the man you choose to be from this day forward. 6 months passed. The Charlotte Spring arrived, and with it, a new beginning. Julian Devereaux received 20 years, Beatrice, 15. Claire, for her role in the medical manipulation, received 18. Nurse Jenkins received 5. My house felt like home again. I had replanted the roses. They were small, but they were budding. I had joined a gardening club. I hosted a book club. My new neighbor, Eleanor Jameson, a retired professor, brought me flowers. My life, which had been shrunk by betrayal, was now expanding. I sat on the back porch, sipping tea, watching the sunset paint the sky. Sophia joined me. "Have you decided?" she asked. Marcus, now 3 months into his sentence, had asked if I would visit. "I think I will," I said. "Next week." I'd had a dream about Arthur. He was on the porch swing, smiling. "Healing doesn't mean the wound is gone, Ellie," he'd said. "It means you've found a purpose for the scar." I thought about the foundation Arthur had started for cardiac research. "Sophia," I said, "I want to expand the foundation. I want to add a new division for elder protection, legal support, fraud education, victim services. Using your experience to help others," she smiled. "They chose me because they thought I was a fragile, old, helpless widow," I said. "I'm going to use the very power they tried to take from me to ensure they can never do this to anyone else." The trauma would always be there, a shadow in the corner, a reminder of what humanity was capable of. But as I sat in the home I had fought for, surrounded by a community I was building, I realized the scar was no longer just a source of pain. It was a source of strength. It was a map to a new purpose. And in that, I finally found peace.